Just going to get this out of the way quickly. I'm going to spoil the whole Umineko series in this video, so if you plan on reading it, you have about a few seconds to leave before I start spoiling stuff. Anyway, here I go. It's definitely no secret that Umineko is very much one of the most popular visual novels in the West. However, did you know that in Japan, the series is much more contentious? While on VNDB, we're forced to rate the question and answer arcs as a whole for some reason. But on Arrow Gamescape, the Japanese version of VNDB, they can actually vote on each episode separately. As you'll see, the answer arc episodes do a bit worse overall than the question arc episodes, especially episode 8, which to all the Umineko simps out there who likely rage-clicked this video, I know I'm not the only one who thinks that episode 8 kinda sucks. When it first originally released in Japan, many Japanese fans were calling Ryukishi07 a hack for how episode 8 was written. Anyway, now that I have the online Japanese fanbase on my side, why exactly do I think Umineko Answer Arc episode 8 sucks? Despite this question, I actually still like Umineko overall as a series, and in fact, might still like the answer arcs more overall than the question arcs. Despite the fact that Umineko episodes 1 through 4 have some of the worst pacing in visual novels, it did have some god-tier music, and the mysteries they present are pretty interesting and raise a lot of interesting questions by the end of episode 4. However, episodes 5 through 7 were quite fun and personally a step up for me. Episode 5 brought the whole drama of Natsuhi dropping a child that clearly relates to the culprit, introducing Best Girl Erika, and the reveal of this supposed golden truth that Battler learned after Beatrice supposedly dies. Episode 6 gets even crazier with a lot of clear hints towards multiple personalities, love triangle shenanigans, a goofy wedding between a caped Battler and Erika in a wedding dress, and of course the huge reveal that even if you remove Erika from the picture, there are only 17 inhabitants on the island instead of the assumed 18. Episode 7 might seem a bit slow at first, but the new protagonist Will was a nice change of pace since he was actually consistently competent instead of the bumbling idiot that Battler was. While I wish his argument with white-hair Beatrice was much less vague, it is clear that Ryukishi07 was low-key essentially pointing out the actual answers to the question arcs, episodes 1 through 4, albeit once again through really vague statements, so people likely could still potentially solve the real answer to those themselves. And then of course, the biggest reveal at the end of the tea party, that supposedly in the true timeline, Kirie and Rudolph are essentially the ones that caused the initial killings and are implied to be the culprits but not the true culprits. After coming off what was pretty easily the best tea party in the Umineko series, we get hyped for the crazies that should be episode 8, which leads us to a Halloween party? Now I get it, Ryukishi really likes his fake outs and surprise plot twists, but this was just painful to read. This is only second to episode 1's quote-unquote slice of life scenes, which were 3 to 5 hours longer than it needed to be. Now admittedly, this Halloween party isn't technically a terrible idea. It is nice to have a potential what if Ange was able to actually make it to the Ushiromiya family gathering and everybody was at their best with zero money arguing and everyone just having a good time. And of course, Kinzo actually being alive and being a doting, loving grandpa. However, this portion just went on way too long, which in classical Ryukishi07 fashion had some of the worst pacing ever, clearly lacking an editor. I think maybe 1 or 2 of these short Halloween quiz question segments could have been fun, not this multi-hour headache. If this Halloween portion was the only thing I had an issue with episode 8, then I wouldn't dislike it that much. However, this is where I get to the real major problem I have with episode 8. The whole theme of Battler trying to tell Ange that she does not have to try so hard to find the details of his golden truth, which is implied to be the circumstances of who the real culprit is and what actually happened related to the tragedy of the Ushiromiya family. Now, I get the idea behind it. I do agree to some extent that from an emotional, psychological perspective, people should not obsess too much over who brought about the killing of someone else they loved, or else it'll make them go crazy. However, I think Ryukishi07 went way too far on focusing on this theme, feeling very virtue signaling and pretentious. After reading episodes 5 through 7, which had plenty of excellent plot reveals and twists, I think the reader would naturally be curious to want to see what other secrets still need to be revealed and what emotional payoff the story will get. However, between the vague answers of the question arcs we got in episode 7 and episode 8 focusing way too much on Battler keeping Ange from knowing the truth to an incredibly obnoxious degree, we get a conclusion that should be emotional and heartbreaking, but just ends up being a headache and a half to read for almost 10 hours. What doesn't help is that there's a certain scene with a bunch of goats wanting to know what actually happened. Many people have interpreted this as Ryukishi throwing a jab at real-life fans theory crafting and hyper-focusing too much on figuring out the details of the mystery, and not the emotional stuff. In my opinion, I'd rather be a mindless goat who actually wants to know the truth, instead of being a simp who just follows Ryukishi07's pretentious, virtue signaling style of beating you over the head with a theme that could have been saved for like 1 or 2 scenes. What doesn't help are the magic action scenes. While I've had mixed feelings on them in the previous episodes, they at least had some hype in relation to character development and reveals related to the current theme of the Umineko episode. However, I thought all of the magic fights in episode 8 were just terrible. A weird way to force a shitty version of Avengers Infinity War where everybody is just taking part in a battle where there's not really any stakes. It doesn't help that there's this really dumb scene that everyone seems to love where Lambda Delta and Burkestel fight over some weird popularity contest and how Lambda talks about how she wants to be #1 in the polls or something. It's really fucking stupid, but for some reason people really like that scene, and I thought it perfectly illustrates how pointless the shonen magic action fights were in that particular episode. Despite all I've complained about so far though, in the title of this video, as you'll remember, I do only say episode 8 kind of sucks. There actually are things I like about this episode. One thing you'll never hear me complain about is Umineko's music, and while episode 8 isn't the best individually, maybe mid-tier at best compared to all the other single episodes, there's still some great songs. While I think the Halloween party went on way too long, I thought that music box rendition of the popular Hope theme is surprisingly catchy. Even though I complained about the Burn vs Lambda fight scene from a writing standpoint, the theme song that plays while they're fighting is one of my favorite battle songs composed by Dai. While I complained about the pointless Infinity War aspect where people are just fighting for no reason, I was admittedly happy to see Erika Fururo again, even though she was supposed to be dead. She's pretty easily my favorite character in the whole Umineko series, and she carried episode 5 and 6, even when I was in a phase where I just didn't like Umineko at all. While Erika isn't as engaging as she was in episode 5 and 6, I still enjoyed the role she played in 8, especially in that Trick versus Magic ending. Speaking of which, while I heavily disliked the execution of the Trick versus Magic ending, essentially being the epitome of Ryukushi's pretentious virtue signal theming, I did like the aspect of having the reader choose what they want to believe. If Ryukushi just rewrote this route to where the few choices actually matter in a much less pretentious way, this final choice could have been a very effective idea done right. Finally, while this aspect is only extremely hinted at through imagery, when you figure out the real meaning behind the last scene of Battler and Beatrice and what really went on in the real world, this becomes a lot more tragic than it already is, basically culminating in why the Umineko family tragic murder scenario even happened to begin with. If you want to know the exact meaning of this, you can read the episode 8 manga because, well, the visual novel itself certainly isn't going to spell out this part of the ending in detail. But anyway, that's it. Umineko Chiru, or the Answer Arc episode 8, kinda sucks, and you can't convince me otherwise. Anything I like about this episode is heavily brought down by the overly, obnoxiously, virtue signaling and pretentious Ryukushi 07 got with his "Don't obsess over the truth" theme, as well as the continuing terrible pacing that Ryukushi does, along with a completely pointless Infinity War crossover fight with no stakes and no emotional investment. You can leave a comment below, I suppose. I already know a lot of the Umineko simps that heavily love episode 8 will clamor to defend their points. P.S. Anja's witch outfit is pretty easily the best drip in the series.